You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Seyko, your host. We are the go-to podcast for Penn State rivals. Visit happyvalleyinsider.com for everything Penn State athletics. It's a privilege to be joined by David Sisk to start today's episode. He is the basketball recruiting writer for Kentucky and North Carolina over at rivals.com. David, I really appreciate the time today.
Yeah, Seyko and Cisco. This sounds like some kind of late night ESPN radio show or something. Yeah.
Out on the West Coast, like the 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. slot. David, before we move any further, where can people keep up with your work?
Well, I'm at the Rivals Network. Obviously, you can go to the North Carolina and Kentucky sites, and you can also, there would be Tar Heel Illustrated and Cats Illustrated, and also Coach David Sisk on Twitter.
All right, perfect. And the reason we're talking to you today is because Penn State is getting a North Carolina player, and that is Puff Johnson, someone who's a senior but has 2 years of eligibility left, and someone who was formerly a top recruit, top 100 back in the day, and just really never reached his potential. We're going to talk about a lot about Puff Johnson here to get a better understanding of what he can be as a Nittany Lion. But what would you say are the biggest strengths to his game? What made him at least a decent role player over the past few years?
Well, I want to start out by giving just a little bit of background. He is the brother of Puff Johnson, who was a very successful player, came from Pitt to North Carolina. Very successful player there, has done well in the NBA. And so, a lot of times when you have that familiarity, those family members, you can get a player, like Puff, and it kind of makes sense in a recruitment. So, but there are times I think maybe you think or expect that younger brother is going to be like older brother. It just doesn't have to be sports. It can be all walks of life. And I don't know if that's what the expectations were. I think they were that. It's probably not fair, but he's had some things. He's fought some injuries early in his career, but he's a bigger wing, 6'8", 190. Really, depending on the style of play, most typically a 3, but it could also play a 4. Some if he's in the right system, more of a small ball. But he came in with a reputation of just a dead-eye three-point shooter. And, he fought the injury bug. He played 14 games in 2021. He played 24 games in 21-22, which was the year they went to the national title game.
Yep.
But he was out for, I guess maybe about the first dozen games that they played that year. So he's tried to do that. He's tried to get acclimated. And, he did okay that year in a role. North Carolina played what was called Iron 5. They really didn't go to the bench. And then this last year, obviously North Carolina had a disappointing season. And part of the big point of that was they couldn't shoot the ball. And people really thought, well, maybe Puff, this is supposed to be the guy. Give him time Leaky Black wasn't going to leave the 3. Maybe play him at the 4, put him in at that spot, and this could be a guy who could make some shots and really kind of lift the team. But he, had trouble shooting the 3. He's a lifetime 24.7% three-point shooter, and that's what his claim to fame was. He was a big wing who could shoot the 3. He struggled from there. So maybe a change of setting. It makes sense to recruit him at Penn State. He's a Pennsylvania kid, from the Pittsburgh area. So, I really feel like to build that program, there's a lot of good talent in Pennsylvania, and you need to keep it home. So really you're looking at that. You're looking at a guy who, like I said, is a bigger wing, can rebound. If you look at his numbers, and I'm reading it off here, that's why I'm looking down, his numbers for 40 minutes would be, over his career, would be 10.8 points, 6.8 rebounds, and he would get to the line 3.5 times or 3.1 times per game. So, over a stretch, if he gets time, I would look at him as a role player at Penn State and a guy. It may not sound like much, but you've got to have these guys. I think a guy could get you 8 to 10 points a game, possibly 6 to 8 rebounds. So that's kind of the area that I would look for.
And what do you think ultimately led to? Because I like Cam Johnson's game a lot in the NBA. He was with the Suns and then got traded to the Nets, and then Puff's not exactly following in his older brother's footsteps. At least the trajectory isn't there. But all the untapped potential in the world is kind of what the takeaway is here, and that, as you're saying, a change of scenery could lead to a better opportunity for Puff to be a contributor. I mean, at Penn State, do you view him as a starter? Do you view him as a 6th or a 7th guy off of the bench? What can he ultimately contribute, especially if he's not? I mean, yes, the rebounding will be pretty handy, but if he's not hitting the 3, what can be the best aspect of his game that will help Penn State and Mike Rhodes?
Well, I'll give you this answer because I really am not familiar with what the roster looks like for Penn State.
Okay.
But I think I can give you a good answer here to kind of give you an idea. At North Carolina, a lot of people were saying last year, like I said, that here's the guy maybe that could come in and be that other starter that they needed. And we're talking about after a year had already got off slowly. Well, Puff Johnson could be the answer. I heard that a lot, and I'm just like thinking, no, he can't be the answer. So, and here's what I mean. If you're looking for a guy and said, okay, this is our guy, he's going to be a scorer, he's going to make a bunch of shots, he can be the guy to score 15, 20 a game, I just don't think he is. I've not seen the consistent shooting there. I think he's a little stiff, to be honest with you. He's not, when you watch him, he's not going to be that guy that's just going to break down the defense. It's going to be fluid. It's going to be all that. I think he's just kind of robotical a little bit in his movements. So I see him as a glue guy. He gives a lot of energy. He's good team, good defense, takes charges. He'll get out some on a break a little bit, but you'll even see on a break when he does that, they're just not, they're not fluid finishes. They're kind of manufactured. And so I see him as a guy, if your roster, you don't have a good roster, and it's a total rebuild. And I can see him, yes, in that starting role, but I can see him on a good team, coming off the bench, being the 6th, 7th man. So, and like I said, he uses some versatility. So he's not stuck in one position. He can play the 3, he can play the 4. So there's different places you can use him. There's different ways you can use him. But he's got to have that defined role. And so when you're talking about, to me, when I hear untapped potential, it sounds to me like, hey, if this guy's ceiling, if he really gets going, then he can score 15 a game, 20 a game. He can be the number 1, number 2 option. You put the ball in his hands, he can deliver. I don't think he's that kind of guy. I think he's a role. I think his ceiling, like I said, I think maybe 10 points a game, but I would look more, like I said, about 8 points, about 6 rebounds, playing the 3, playing the 4, and playing in a specific role. But it's got to be a team-related role. It just can't be, hey, here's the ball, we're going to stand around, you create for us. He's not going to be that kind of player.
The expert himself when it comes to Duke and North Carolina, the Blue Bloods recruiting expert over at Rivals.com. That is David Sisk. David, thank you so much again. Where can people keep up with your work?
Well, you can find me, I guess the best place, Coach David Sisk on Twitter. You see that at the bottom of the screen right there below my name. Can use all the follow. It's all about the Twitter followers, right? Yeah. 2023. but also Rivals, like I said, the North Carolina and the Kentucky sites.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Today's episode is sponsored by Built. Are you looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all of the sugar and calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built, you got to try this. And if you're like me, where you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise all the taste, I've got just the thing for you: Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are so healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing that you won't think they're good for you. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably tasty flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm really not sure how Built does this, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy: only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, which you still can do, but now you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today and walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab yourself a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. Now on to our next special guest of the show, Ron Bailey. Welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, your host, and I'm joined by another special guest on this episode as we're previewing Penn State players that are coming in the transfer portal, and that is publisher of HoyaReport.com through the Rivals.com network, and that is Ron Bailey. Ron, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it to help us get some perspective on Qudus Wahab coming in the transfer portal to the Nittany Lions.
No problem at all. I've known the guy since he was he was in 10th grade. I know his mentors. Wow. I know a lot of people around him. We have a pretty good relationship. So I kind of know a few things.
So then, we're Penn State fans are really going to appreciate your insight and the analysis here. But so why then, you know a lot about this. What exactly is Georgetown losing for the second time? Because he did this once, went to Maryland, and then came back to Georgetown, and now he's going to Penn State. So, and as he's grown as a player, literally physically and mentally and everything else, what is Georgetown going to have to replace this time around as he's now more of a veteran player?
Okay, great question. So, Q has had a roller coaster career as it relates to effectiveness. His first 2 years at Georgetown were okay. They were solid. I mean, especially as a freshman year, he really showed some signs. He jumped ship, went to Maryland. It was a catastrophe. I mean, I don't think you can really label it any other way. Mm-hmm. They really stopped playing him as the season went on. They wouldn't pass him the ball. Many of the players wouldn't pass him the ball. It was a catastrophe. And then he came back. When he came back, to be blunt, he struggled last year. Part of it was the ugly, toxic environment that was Georgetown basketball last year. Wow. I mean, in the sense of not just a larger cultural issue, but the individual players. Some of those guys weren't great guys. Okay. So Q is he's Nigerian. He is respectful. He is not a guy that say F you, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's not one of those guys. He'll try to work around the issue. You know what I mean? So when dudes are leaning on him, in my opinion, it kind of hampered what he could do. Now, that being said, physically, he was hurt much of last year. He had a leg injury. So when you guys go back and watch the tape, if you look at him transitioning on the court, you probably will see him limping some, a little bit. It was kind of faint, but it was a thing. And then he started trying too hard, and it just went to crap. What was going on at Georgetown at the time, which is basically the demise of Patrick Ewing as the head coach. He had a year when Qudus came back. He had a year with Qudus. That did not help. Okay, at all. So I'm not just going to say that the kid had a bunch of problems. There were some systemic problems too. But last year was not a stellar performance. It was not indicative of what Q Wahab can do or has done on the basketball court.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair to say, because you look at his best season was his second year of college basketball at Georgetown, when he had 27 minutes, over 12 points per game, and over 8 rebounds per game. And I look at Wahab and I say, if he has the right amount of minutes, if he's playing about half an hour every single game, he could easily average a double-double for Penn State in the Big Ten. Is that fair to say?
If he's right physically.
Okay.
And emotional, yes. Does he have the chops to maybe get a double-double in the Big Ten at Penn State? Yes. But he has to come in right, and he has to be utilized right. So that sophomore year, Georgetown dumped the ball into him a lot. Ewing was, I'm the center guy. So the center in that year was featured. It was the first go-to, the first option. So some of his points kind of like were off of that. He performed, but he still was a real, he was an option. He was a primary option. So for him to be a double-double Big Ten guy, if he ain't the primary option, he'll probably have to be, option 2, 2.5. Now, that being said, over the summers, I've seen him work on his game. One of the problems or one of the issues of him, he had no counters, or he displayed no counters in games. But in DC, they have a thing called the Kenner League, which is a college summer league where cats from different teams play. You know what I'm talking about. And he would work on his left hand. He would go over his right shoulder as opposed to just forcing everything over his left shoulder. It was looking good this past summer. And then when he got to the team, he got to the season, we didn't see any of that. So if I'm Penn State, I assign a physical workout guy, somebody to work with him and sit on him all summer long, so he'll be in the right physical and mental space to get that double-double in the Big Ten.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions, and we'll talk more about how Wahab fits in with Penn State with Ron Bailey in just a second. Locked On's NFL mock draft special is here. It's bigger than ever. Follow along all 32 teams. First pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now at Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And the draft is, when you listen or watch this back, it's already underway. So all the draft analysis, go to Locked On NFL Draft for everything from all the picks that are coming our way. Again, Ron Bailey of the Hoya Nation on Twitter, the Hoya Report, part of the Rivals.com network. And we're talking Qudus Wahab as finally Penn State gets a legitimate big man. I feel like it's been such a long time since the Nittany Lions had a presence like that in the front court. And it's no disrespect to John Harrah, but John Harrah had to play much bigger than his actual physical size at 6'8", 6'9", whereas Wahab is 6'11". He towers over you. He is that true 5 center. And now he comes to Penn State where, like you said, he's got to work on some different things like his counters. But ultimately, I imagine that you are a little more familiar with Mike Rhodes' system since he was at VCU. I know that you primarily cover Georgetown, but that DC, Maryland, Virginia kind of all interconnects, right? Now that since you are familiar with Mike Rhodes' system, how do you believe that Wahab's going to be used, and why he ultimately chose Penn State and not somewhere else?
I don't think that they will use. To utilize Qudus Wahab to the extent that he can be utilized. They can't necessarily play like they did at VCU, as much like they did at VCU. Okay. Meaning at VCU, they didn't have a throw you one into the middle and get you one down low guy. Now, kind of, they had one in his Williams was his last name, but he moved out to the perimeter, and when he did, his touches ballooned. So I love Rhodes as a coach. It's just he will have to make sure Q gets touches. Now, and the guy doing that will be Ace Baldwin. Right, I'm familiar with him too. Yeah, he's my guy, one of my guys from Baltimore. Ace needs to pair with Qudus to get the most out of this year, in my opinion. Because Ace is going to be the one. He's going to be the trigger man, right? And he has a very strong personality. That team's going to go like Ace wants it to go. So if Rhodes, in my opinion, not even just schematically, but if Rhodes really wants to maximize what Q can do, pair him, make sure those two are a tandem, and become almost like a cultural tandem. This is what we do. We're going to give the Ace, give the ball to Q. Now, Q, you can't be the black hole. You got to kick it back out too. You know what I mean? We have to have that kind of synergy. But I think that's how Mike Rhodes can really maximize what Qudus Wahab can do. Qudus Wahab can do.
Final question I have for you, Ron, is just ultimately the expectations, right? There's things that he needs to work on. There's things that he's been working on. If I know that he has battled some injuries, but let's just say for the benefit of the doubt, fully healthy, he can play around that 25 to 30 minute range that he has played when we've seen him at his best. Ultimately, what do you believe he can average, what he can contribute and help push Penn State along through the Big Ten? And ultimately, the goal is to get back to the NCAA tournament. Can he help them do that?
Wow, that's a great question. That was a good one. Production, I think he can get, if he comes in ready to bang, ready to work, and it's kind of like made to feel like he's part of the program, made to feel that he's important. I think he can definitely get almost around 10 rebounds a game. Okay. If we do that. Offensively, it's going to be predicated on his touch count because he's not stepping out to the elbow shooting face-ups. Mm-hmm. All right, so he's a back-to-the-basket guy, pretty much. He ain't really facing up 1-2 or rip-through jab, go. He's not that kind of guy. So he's a dependent guy as it relates to offense. So he'll need Ace and their coach to kind of like make sure this guy gets a number of touches a game. If he can do that, if he can get maybe 8 touches, get to the free throw line, remain healthy, I think he can maybe push around 10 points a game. Again, depending on how he's utilized.
All right, that's what I'm hoping for, because my immediate reaction when I saw him at his best and just started watching some highlights, the highlights, I'll dive deeper into the tape as basketball comes closer. But I said, I'm like, I really think if he plays around 30 minutes a game, this is a 10-10 performance at least, right? Some nights he'll have 15-10 or, maybe in the other way around 10 points, 15 rebounds. But I feel like he could average very close to a double-double because we saw it before when he was younger.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I would just put the caveat, you got to make sure he touches the rock if you're going to hit that 10 points, because again, he's a dependent position, and he's not really when he touches the ball, it's not like you see Hakeem Olajuwon, okay, or the Dream Shake or anything. So he's more plodding, as you've seen. So, but I mean, I really do think if he's in the right mind space, if he's in the right physical space, if the program embraces him, because I really thought that he was kicked to the curb by Georgetown last year too. Okay. Mm-hmm. That had to have, and there were some question marks on whether he could have played during the game. It got kind of like crappy. You know what I mean? Yeah. It got crappy. And that's no way for a kid to excel. Okay. So that had to hamper his development and his production. But if they can tailor some things to him, work with him, I think they could probably get a 10-10, considering that the guy that was there or is there now is not a 6'11", 250-pound guy.
Yeah, Penn State fans should be happy based on what you're saying. Ron, I really appreciate the time. Again, that is Ron Bailey from the Hoya Report, publisher of HoyaReport.com through the Rivals.com network. Again, just what can you tell people, shout out about your work that you do? You do such incredible work.
We just follow everything Georgetown basketball, to a lesser degree to women's, mostly men, recruiting, games, behind the scenes, all-star games, summer leagues. If you have an inkling, any curiosity about Georgetown basketball, come on over to HoyaReport.com and we'll get you right.
And a new coach, so Georgetown fans should be just as excited as well.
Oh, they're off the charts about Cooley. I mean, it's and the reason being, it's a sea change from what was before. Culturally, yep. He is. And so we Georgetown fans have been kind of like shackled for a long time, bro. Like it wasn't a lot of joy necessarily all the time, at least within the program. And I think that extended outside the program, to be honest. But he's engaging. He gets out. He's a man of the people. He's not an ivory tower guy who sits behind, up on the ivory tower and looks down. He's a man of the people. So at very least, he will get a lot of people back into the Hoyas into the Hoyas' pocket as fans because they're going to feel like they matter.
Exciting stuff. I hope we see both schools in the NCAA tournament next season. Ron, I really appreciate the time. Thanks so much for the perspective about Q, and be well. Thank you.
Thank you.